My husband was in the hospital when my 5-year-old whispered, "Mom, do you know what's on Dad's back?" Confused, I asked what she meant. She lifted the sheet. In that instant, I couldn't breathe. My daughter has always been the kind of child who notices things, not in a precocious, show-off way. She's not that kind of kid. She's quiet, watchful, the type who sits at the edge of a room and takes everything in before she decides whether to enter it. Her kindergarten teacher, Ms. Portillo, told me at the fall conference that Lucy was extraordinarily observant for her age, and she said it the way you say something that is both a compliment and a small, careful warning. I should have listened more carefully to both the compliment and the warning. What Lucy noticed on a Tuesday afternoon in room 214 of Mercy General Hospital, while her father lay sleeping and I was gathering my coat to go get coffee from the vending machine down the hall. What my 5-year-old daughter, quietly, deliberately, with the gravity of someone who had been carrying a secret until the weight became unbearable, chose to show me, I cannot describe without first telling you that in the 3 seconds between her fingers closing around the edge of that hospital sheet, and the moment she pulled it back, I almost stopped her. Something in her face made me hesitate. Something too old, too certain. I didn't stop her. She pulled the sheet down slowly, to his waist, and turned to look at me. I looked at my husband's back. My legs went. I caught myself on the bed rail and stood there and stared, and the sounds of the hospital, the intercom, the squeak of rubber soles in the corridor, the distant beep of a monitor, all of it went very far away, like someone had turned down the volume on the world to help me concentrate on what I was seeing. On Ethan's lower back, just above the waistband of the hospital gown, there were markings, not a bruise. I know what bruises look like, and I know what fading surgical scars look like, and I know the various topographies of a body I had slept beside for 9 years. This was none of those things. Symbols, numbers, a sequence, neat and dark and raised against the skin, like something pressed in deliberately, permanently, like a stamp of ownership on livestock. "Mom," Lucy said quietly, "I saw it at home. He told me not to tell you. 5 years old, keeping that secret for him." I want to tell you that my first feeling was fear for my husband. It wasn't. My first feeling, and I have been honest about this in the therapy sessions that followed, with a woman named Dr. Carla Metz, who has spent 15 years specializing in trauma and coercive relationships, was a very specific kind of grief, not for what was on his back, for what was in my daughter's face when she said those words. He told me not to tell you. Whatever was happening to Ethan, Lucy had been inside it too. She had been made to carry it, quietly, alone. At 5 years old, my daughter had been recruited as a keeper of her father's secrets, and the weight of it was sitting right there in her eyes. That was what broke me open. Everything else, the fear, the investigation, the nights at my sister's, the messages on the phone, the man named Darren with his little league trophies and his LinkedIn profile, all of that came after, but it started there, with Lucy's face. Let me back up. Ethan and I had been married for 9 years when this happened. We met in graduate school. He was studying supply chain management, I was finishing a master's in public health, and we were the kind of couple who got together fast and stayed together quietly, without drama or rupture, building a life that looked, from the outside and mostly from the inside too, like something solid. A 2-bedroom house in Crestwood, a Honda CR-V we paid off early. Lucy, born the year I turned 30, who had her father's eyes and my stubbornness. Ethan worked in logistics coordination for a manufacturing company called Vantage Group for 6 years. He was good at it, methodical, detail-oriented, the kind of person who color-coded his calendar and read contracts before signing them. He made $74,000 a year, which combined with my salary as a health program coordinator for the county made us comfortable. Not wealthy, comfortable. The mortgage, the daycare, the savings account we added to every month, the annual trip to see my parents in Tucson. Then Vantage Group restructured. March of last year, 42 people let go in a single afternoon, which I have since learned is called a workforce realignment when companies do it, and a Tuesday in March that changed everything when it happens to your family. Ethan was calm about it. More calm than I expected, actually. He said he had savings to cover us for 4 months. He had contacts. He'd find something. And he was trying. I saw the LinkedIn activity, the emails from recruiters, the cover letters he worked on at night after Lucy went to bed. I saw the trying. What I didn't see was what happened when the trying stopped working. 8 months. That's how long it takes for a careful, methodical man to get desperate enough to answer an ad for warehouse logistics work, flexible hours, cash pay, posted on a community board by a man who goes by Darren. I didn't know any of this. Not a word, not a suggestion. For 8 months, while I deposited my paycheck and paid the mortgage and took Lucy to soccer and made dinners and said, "How was your day?" across the kitchen table, my husband was living in a parallel reality that had its own geography and its own rules, and it turned out its own methods of enforcing them. Looking back, and I have looked back so many times that I've worn the path smooth, I can identify the red flags. I'm a public health professional. I know how to assess risk. I know how to recognize behavioral changes and stress indicators, but I was inside it, which is exactly the environment in which those skills are hardest to apply. He started taking the car at odd hours. I told myself job leads, networking, things he didn't want to talk about until they were real. He began sleeping in the guest room, saying he was restless and didn't want to wake me. I told myself stress, which was real and apparent and seemed like a complete enough explanation. There was a 3-week stretch in August when he was distracted in a way that felt different from the job search distraction, quieter, more internal, and I asked him once, directly, if something was wrong, and he said no, and I believed him, because in 9 years he had not lied to me about anything significant, and I had not yet updated my model of who he was. The hospital was a Thursday in November. Ethan had come home late the night before, pale and not quite right, said he'd pulled something in his back at work, went to bed early. By morning he couldn't stand straight. By 10 a.m., the pain was bad enough that I drove him to the ER while my sister Pam watched Lucy. The intake nurse asked what happened, and Ethan said he'd strained his back lifting boxes. The attending physician, Dr. Marcus Webb, not the same Marcus Webb from Another Story, but the name echoes, which life sometimes does, diagnosed a grade 2 muscle strain and recommended rest and ibuprofen, and potentially a follow-up with an orthopedic specialist if it didn't improve. They admitted him overnight for pain management and observation because his blood pressure was elevated and they wanted to monitor it. I went home that night. Pam stayed with Lucy. The next morning I brought Lucy with me to visit because she'd asked to see Daddy 3 times before 8 a.m., and I didn't have the heart to keep saying later. She held my hand all the way up in the elevator. She was very quiet. I should have read that quiet more carefully. Ethan was sleeping when we arrived. Lucy climbed onto the chair beside the bed and studied her father's face with that particular gravity she reserves for things she's trying to understand. I sat on the other side and answered some emails. The room was ordinary. Beige walls, fluorescent light, the kind of institutional quiet that makes you feel slightly outside of real time. I was reaching for my coat, thinking about the vending machine coffee, thinking about nothing much, when Lucy said, in a voice so small I almost missed it, "Mom, do you know what's on Dad's back?" I stopped. Something in the way she said it. Not curious, careful. The way you speak when you've been holding a sentence ready for a long time and have finally decided it's safe to say it. What do you mean, Luce? She didn't answer right away. She looked at me and then at Ethan and then back at me. And then she reached out slowly and curled her fingers around the top edge of the hospital sheet. I almost told her to leave it. Some instinct, protective or perhaps self-protective, almost made me say, "Leave it, sweetheart. Daddy's sleeping." I don't know what stopped me. Maybe the look on her face. Maybe some part of me already knew that the reason she was asking this particular question in this particular careful voice was because the answer mattered. She pulled the sheet back, and I saw it. I stood at that bed rail for what felt like a very long time but was probably 30 seconds. The markings were on his lower back, left of the spine, approximately 4 inches by 3. Dark ink or pigment pressed into the skin in a way that was raised and textured to the touch. I did reach out. I did touch it, once with 2 fingers, because my brain needed the tactile confirmation that what my eyes were seeing was real. The symbols were alphanumeric, a letter sequence, then a dash, then a 4-digit number, then another sequence. Neat, deliberate. Not the work of a moment or an impulse. This had been done to him intentionally, by someone who wanted him to carry it, Lucy said, in the same small, careful voice. I saw it at home, when he was getting dressed. He saw me see it, and he said, "Don't tell Mommy." The room was very quiet. Ethan's eyes opened. He saw my face, and his expression went through 3 things in approximately 1 second. Recognition, calculation, and then something that collapsed into resignation. He pushed himself up, hissed sharply, and fell back against the pillow. His face was the color of chalk. "What is that?" I said. It was not a question. "Lucy, sweetheart, can you go ask the nurse for some water?" "No," I said. My voice was very calm. I have since learned from Dr. Metz that this is a common stress response, the appearance of calm as a coping mechanism, when the alternative is a loss of control that the nervous system calculates would be counterproductive. At the time, I simply knew that I needed to stay upright and speak clearly, and not let my daughter see me fall apart. Lucy looked at me. I shook my head once, slightly. She stayed in her chair. Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked at the ceiling for a moment, and then at me. "Please," he started. "You said not to tell," Lucy whispered. The room went completely silent. He closed his eyes. It took him 3 minutes. He told me in fragments, the way you tell something you've been protecting for a long time. Not linearly, but in pieces that he offered up like parts of something broken, seeing if I could make sense of the shape. Off the books work, after the layoff, a posting online that promised flexible hours and cash pay, a man at a warehouse who called himself Darren and spoke warmly and knew exactly how to talk to a man who was frightened and running out of runway. The first few weeks had been legitimate. Moving inventory, no questions asked, cash in hand. Then the work changed. He was asked to drive things, to not ask what he was driving, to pick up packages from addresses he didn't recognize, and deliver them to people who didn't give names. He tried to walk away after 2 months. Darren had explained at that point why walking away wasn't how it worked. "It's a debt code," Ethan whispered. "They said, it's what they use so that no one takes you unless they know who owns you. So their people know you're spoken for. Owns." I put my hand flat on the bed rail because I needed something solid. "How long?" I asked. 8 months. I looked at my daughter, who was sitting in the bedside chair with her hands folded in her lap, and the expression of a child who has been waiting for a very long time for the adults in the room to catch up to what she already knows. "Are they threatening us?" I said. Ethan said nothing. The look on his face was the answer. "They know our address," he said, quietly. I tried not to give it to them, but they had it. They showed me. Our house, our street, Lucy's school. The sound of the hospital came back at full volume. The intercom, the footsteps, the distant beeping. And I stood in it for approximately 4 seconds, and then I kissed the top of Lucy's head, and I walked out of the room and down the hall to the nurse's station. Calm voice, clear words. "I need hospital security and a social worker. Right now, my husband has non-medical markings on his body, and we have reason to believe our family is being threatened. The charge nurse, a man named Terrence, tall, steady, with the unflappable energy of someone who has absorbed a great many urgent statements in his career, picked up the phone before I finished the sentence. Officer Dana Reyes arrived within 20 minutes. Patrol, but experienced. She'd been with the department for 11 years, she told me later, and had done 2 years in a specialized human trafficking task force before rotating back to general patrol. She did not lead with skepticism, which I had been afraid of. She looked at the markings on Ethan's back, listened to his account, took photographs with her department-issued phone, and then asked him, methodically, to give her everything he had. Names, locations, phone numbers. Ethan gave them. His hand shook through the entire thing. He had saved numbers in his phone under false names, contacts labeled Jake H and Warehouse M, which he had never shown me, never mentioned, and which he pulled up now and handed to Officer Reyes with something in his face that looked, underneath the fear, like relief. The relief of someone who has been carrying something alone for so long that the act of putting it down, even in circumstances like these, feels like mercy. They've driven past our house, he told her, twice, that I know of. Officer Reyes's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped a register into something harder and more focused. When was the last time? She asked. Last week, he said. Thursday night. She made 2 calls in the hallway outside the room. I stood with Lucy, who had climbed into my lap in the bedside chair and gone very still, her face pressed against my collarbone, and I held her with both arms and stared at the floor and let myself feel, for exactly 1 minute, everything I had been not feeling since I walked into that room. Then I stopped. There would be time for the feeling later. Right now, I needed to move. We did not go home that night. I called my sister Pam while Officer Reyes was still in the room, and Pam, who is 4 years older than me, has the practical efficiency of someone who has managed crises for a living, and asked exactly 2 questions before saying, "Come now," had the guest room ready by the time Lucy and I arrived. Ethan stayed admitted, not for the back strain, for safety. Officer Reyes had been direct about it. The hospital was a documented, observable location, and until they had more information, it was safer than a house these people already had the address to. Before I left, Ethan grabbed my hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought staying quiet would keep you safe." I looked at him in that bed, pale, marked, ashamed, frightened, and I felt something harden in my chest that has not entirely softened since. "Staying quiet didn't keep us safe," I said. "It just kept us unprepared." I didn't say it cruelly, but I said it clearly. His eyes closed. I took my daughter and left. At Pam's that night, after Lucy was asleep in the guest room and Pam had gone to bed and the house was quiet with the particular quality of 11 p.m. Quiet that feels both safe and slightly unreal. I sat at the kitchen table with Ethan's phone. He had given it to me before I left, wordlessly, setting it on the blanket beside him the way you give someone something you've been holding too long, and I went through it, all of it. 8 months of messages. His phone password was Lucy's birthday, June 14th. I had known that. He had said it that way when she was born and never changed it, which was either sentimental or careless, depending on how you looked at it and which I chose. That night, to count as the single piece of good fortune in this entire disaster. I read for 2 hours. The messages were in 3 threads. The first was with the contact labeled Warehouse M. Logistics, scheduling, pickup instructions, nothing that would look alarming to a casual glance. The second was with Jake H. Shorter exchanges, clipped with the specific shorthand of people who don't want to write things down, but sometimes have to. And the third was a thread with a number that wasn't saved under any name at all, just 10 digits. That third thread was where Darren lived. I didn't know it was Darren until I read far enough to find the message where Ethan, in what must have been a moment of either courage or desperation, had written, "Darren, I need to talk to you. I want out. I have a daughter." And the response, which came back 47 minutes later, was, "Everyone has something. That's the point." Then, 3 days later, a photograph. Our house, taken from the street at night with the porch light on. Our front door, the number on the mailbox, Lucy's bicycle, pink with white streamers, leaning against the garage. Ethan had replied, "Please, she's 5. Darren had replied, "I know." My hands were completely steady when I found that message. That fact frightened me more than shaking would have. I had gone somewhere past the emotional register where hands shake, into a colder and more purposeful place. I opened a new browser window. I typed the phone number from Darren's thread into a reverse lookup service. The name that came back was Darren Hollis, age 41. Address in a suburb called Maple Grove, 14 miles from where we lived. I typed the name into Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, a local Chamber of Commerce directory, a profile on a youth sports volunteer page. Darren Hollis, owner of a mid-size freight brokerage called Pinnacle Transit Solutions, married, 2 children, ages 9 and 12, both at Maple Grove Academy, a private school with an annual tuition I was able to find with one search. He coached Little League on Saturdays. His LinkedIn listed him as a community leader and family-oriented entrepreneur. His Facebook profile photo was him grinning at a Little League award ceremony, arm around a kid half his size, holding a trophy. I stared at that photo for a long time. The kid in the photo was maybe 9, probably the same age as one of Darren's own children. He was smiling up at Darren with the uncomplicated trust of a child who has been coached well and celebrated for it, and Darren was grinning at the camera, and everything about the image said, "This is a good man, a community asset, someone you'd trust with your kids." My daughter's bicycle was in that man's phone. I compiled everything, every message, every photograph, every voice voice note I found in the thread. There were 4, and I listened to each of them twice. And in the third one, I could hear Darren laughing while someone in the background described marking new recruits, using the word property twice and the phrase owns you once, and laughing harder when that phrase was used. I saved everything to my email, to a cloud drive, and to Pam's laptop as a secondary backup. Then I forwarded the complete file, every message, every voice note, the reverse lookup result, the photograph of our house, all of it, to the detective assigned to our case, Detective Alicia Moreno, 15 years with the Organized Crime Division, currently working a joint task force with federal investigators. She had been assigned to our case the day after Officer Reyes filed her initial report, and she had called me that morning to introduce herself and give me her direct line and ask me to contact her immediately if I found anything relevant. I sent the email at 11:31 p.m., then I sat for a moment, then I did one more thing. Darren Hollis's wife was named Christine. Her Facebook profile was public. I found it in 4 minutes. Her most recent post from that morning, less than 12 hours ago, was a photograph of a coffee cup on a marble countertop, morning light falling across it at the angle of something carefully composed, with the caption, "Grateful for this life," and a small sun emoji. I stared at that post for a long time. Grateful for this life. The house in Maple Grove, the private school, the Little League Saturdays, the freight brokerage, all of it funded, at least in part, by a man who had put a photograph of my daughter's bicycle into a threatening message to a frightened father who just wanted to stop. I thought about what I knew and what she might know, and whether those two things were the same. I thought about Lucy, asleep in the next room with her hands curled under her chin the way she'd slept since she was a baby. I opened Facebook Messenger. I wrote carefully, not with anger, with precision. I introduced myself. I told her my name, my husband's name, the name of the hospital where he was currently admitted. I told her what we had found on his back. I told her that a detective from Organized Crime had been assigned to investigate, and that I had just forwarded her husband's name, phone number, address, and 8 months of documented messages to that detective. I told her that I was writing to her not to threaten or accuse, but because I was a mother, and she was a mother, and I believed she deserved to know what was coming before it arrived at her door. I told her that her children deserved a mother who had the chance to prepare. I ended by including Detective Moreno's direct phone number, in case she wanted to call before calling a lawyer. I read it over twice. I changed 2 words. I sent it at 11:42 p.m. At 11:47, the message marked as read. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I put the phone down and went to check on Lucy, and when I came back 5 minutes later, there was a reply. I won't reproduce it word for word. What I will tell you is that it was 2 paragraphs long. The first paragraph said that she needed more time to process this. The second paragraph said that she had known, for approximately 14 months, that something was wrong, and that she had asked Darren directly twice and been told twice that she was imagining things. She was not imagining things. She called Detective Moreno at 8:14 the following morning. I want to give you the full accounting, because I know you're waiting for it. Detective Moreno called me 4 days later. I was at Pam's kitchen table again. Lucy was at school, the pickup code in place, Pam's neighbor on standby for secondary pickup if anything felt wrong, and I answered on the first ring. I want to update you on where we are, she said. She had that specific cadence of a law enforcement professional delivering good news in a way that doesn't inflate it, measured, factual, with the slight undercurrent of someone who has been waiting to make this call. The messages I had forwarded, combined with Christine Hollis's voluntary cooperation and the phone records she had provided access to, had given the task force sufficient grounds for a search warrant. Pinnacle Transit Solutions had been the subject of a parallel investigation for 18 months. Freight brokerage as a cover for controlled substance distribution was, Detective Moreno told me, a pattern the task force had been building a case around for some time, and what we had provided was the personal coercion documentation that transformed a financial investigation into a human trafficking predicate. Darren Hollis was arrested at his home in Maple Grove at 6:47 a.m. on a Wednesday. The charges, as ultimately filed, included coercion, extortion, criminal human trafficking under state statute, and federal controlled substance conspiracy. Gregory Watts, the man who had actually performed the markings, Ethan identified him in a photo array, was arrested the same morning at a warehouse in the industrial district. 3 other men were arrested in the same sweep. I know this because Detective Moreno told me. I also know it because it was on the local news, briefly. A segment about a freight brokerage front and a human trafficking operation and several arrests. Darren's name and face were on the broadcast. The Little League photo, pulled from his public Facebook, appeared on the screen while the anchor spoke. His children were in school when it aired. Christine had taken them there herself that morning. She had called a lawyer the night before, and the lawyer had called the prosecutor, and she had been given the window she needed to prepare her children as best she could for what was coming. I don't know what she told them. I imagine there is no good version of that conversation. I thought about my own daughter, carrying a secret she should never have been asked to carry. I thought about the specific, unbearable weight of a child protecting a parent's hidden life, and I genuinely hoped, that Christine's kids would find, over time, the same kind of sturdy, bone-deep okayness that I was watching Lucy slowly locate inside herself with the help of a children's therapist named Sandra, who specialized in family trauma and who had a practice full of toys and a voice that made Lucy's shoulders come down from her ears within the first 10 minutes. Ethan was discharged from the hospital 7 days after all of this began. He came to Pam's house rather than ours, which remained unoccupied while the investigation was active, and a patrol car conducted periodic drive-bys per Detective Moreno's arrangement. He sat down across from me at Pam's kitchen table on a Saturday morning and said, "I don't know how to start." I said, "Start with the truth, all of it, every part." He did. It took 4 hours. Pam took Lucy to the park and came back and took her to lunch and came back again, and Ethan and I were still at that table when they returned. I asked questions. He answered them. Some answers I had already assembled from the phone records and the detective's updates. Others I hadn't. I want to be accurate about what came after, because I've told this story to people who expected a particular ending, and the actual ending is more complicated than satisfying. We are still together. I want to say that plainly. Not because it's triumphant and not because everything is fine, but because it's true. And I think the truth is more useful than a cleaner narrative. We are in couples counseling twice a month with a therapist named Dr. James Okafor, who has a practice specializing in betrayal trauma and family recovery. We are also both in individual therapy. It is not a process I would describe as easy or as resolved or as anything other than ongoing. Ethan made a catastrophic choice, many catastrophic choices across 8 months, each one compounding the last. And the damage to the trust between us is real and deep and will take time to either repair or honestly assess. What I can tell you is that he told the truth, the whole truth, the minute he was in a room where Lucy could witness it. He chose her finally as the reason to stop hiding. I hold on to that. I don't know yet what it means for everything else, but I hold on to it. We moved back into the house in February. Lucy asked if the bad men knew where we lived, and I told her yes, they used to. But they were in a place now where they couldn't drive past anymore. And she thought about this for a long moment with that watchful face of hers. Then she said, "Good," and went to get her bicycle from the garage, the pink one with the white streamers. She rode it up and down the driveway in the late winter sun, and I stood on the porch and watched her, and I thought about what Dr. Metz had said in our last session, that the thing Lucy had done in that hospital room, carrying that secret until she could carry it no more, and then placing it deliberately in the hands of the one person she trusted to do something with it, was not a child's mistake. It was a child's profound, instinctive act of trust. She had trusted me to handle it, and I had. She rode her bicycle to the end of the driveway and turned around and came back, and her streamers caught the wind, and she was laughing at something only she could see, and she was okay. She was okay. That's the ending. Not a courtroom mic drop, not a viral moment, not a line that lands like a verdict. Just my daughter on her bicycle on a cold February afternoon, streamers flying, laughing at the wind. Darren Hollis, at last report, was awaiting trial on 6 federal counts. His LinkedIn profile is still up. The photo with the trophy, the kid half his size. I don't look at it anymore. I watch my daughter ride her bicycle instead, and I think about what it means to be trusted with someone's hardest truth, and I try, every day, imperfectly, honestly, to be worth it.